we're having to reach out, and people like me, like, I'm a Lone Ranger, I got this, that's a trauma response too, by the way, but it's the perfect time to reach out to friends, to let people hold you, to accept gifts. Hey, can you make me dinner? And these are things, I feel like there's a hidden blessing of COVID, is that we're learning to come together in a way that we have not ever done it in a cooperative way.
Welcome to the pursuit of wealth, where the H is surrounded by abundance. Today, we welcome you with open arms, an open heart, and an open mind to what is going to be a wonderful conversation. We have a very special guest with us today. Her name is Tana G. Marie. She is a biodynamic breathwork facilitator and trauma recovery coach who is on a mission to help women feel safe in their bodies and empowered in the world. She integrates her expertise in breathwork, myofascial release, somatics, and coaching to help her clients identify and release blockages on a core level, inviting freedom, confidence, and full expression. In her free time, Tana loves hosting women's circles and geeking out on neuroscience. I do believe there is a caveat to cats in there as well, but we can get to that later. So welcome, Tana. Welcome to the pursuit of wealth. We're so grateful that you took time out of your day today to join us in what we believe will be a very tantalizing conversation in all areas that you work in. So tell us, what is trauma recovery? What is that? Can you define that for us a little bit more?
Well, thank you for having me. I'd love to go back just a step, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, not at all.
What is trauma? Because it's
Mm,
sort of a big scary word, and I have had the reaction of, uh-oh, I'm gonna shy away from that. We have this impression that trauma has to be a severe accident or physical or sexual abuse. That's common, what we think of when we think of trauma. But trauma is so common. Almost every one of us has experienced some trauma. Trauma will live on in the body and the nervous system if the cycle is not completed. And I'll go more
mm,
into that in a minute if I can. But so
Please do.
trauma can be a fall off of your bike. Trauma can be bullying in the classroom, in the schoolyard. Trauma can be abusive words or neglect. Almost everyone I meet has some sort of trauma. And what we don't understand often in our culture is that it's not just a physical injury that causes trauma. There is an emotional system reaction when we have a threat, a perceived threat. We will go into activation, we will brace for it. And then in the wild, the animals will run, they'll release that energy or they'll freeze. But when it's over, the threat is over, they shake it off, they run, they expel the energy. So we don't have an opportunity most of the time to expel this, to complete this cycle. So the trauma stays in our body. That looks like guarded emotions. So you might know some people who are just, they seem rigid, right? It's in their body too. As I was a massage therapist, I was noticing these people, their trauma was literally in their tissues. They wanted deep tissue, but they wouldn't let me in. They had this posture of fear, of guarding, and they looked like they were kind of turned to stone, unfortunately. So my work in trauma recovery is to unravel these layers of trauma, to help women especially get free from these restrictions they might not even know they have. They're in the body, but they're also limiting behaviors, beliefs, um, patterns that end up blocking us. So my work is sort of a peeling of an onion of all of these restrictions so people can live with more expression, more freedom.
This idea of trauma, if you asked me 4 years ago, I would have rejected the term because I thought if I said that I had a traumatic background, that it would erase the love and kindness or anything else that I had experienced without understanding that they can all exist and and they did exist, right? And so I was brought to the first, speaking about this trauma and how it lives in the body. I was told, or I was guided to read a book by Bessel van der Cook, The Body Keeps Score.
Yes.
And that I actually had to stop reading it about halfway through. This was like 3 years ago. I'm sure if I read it now, I'd have a much different response. But a lot of it was really this visceral response that I was experiencing, reading about the trauma and how it truly has shaped sort of myself in my life. And to the point where you could actually physically see on me when I
Mhm.
was having a trauma response,
Mhm.
because my face would get a very deep, deep red and I would be completely dysregulated.
Mhm.
But asked me 4 years ago, I couldn't have identified that for you.
Mhm.
But now that I can. And so it's very interesting what you speak of is, like I said, it speaks directly to me in my own personal journey. And surely I wish I knew you 3, 4 years ago. I probably could have saved myself a lot of a lot of work. But anyways, it's such a beautiful thing. And so when this idea that the body sort of keeps score is exactly what you're saying, is it?
Yeah. Yes, and I think in my work as a massage therapist, it showed up in women more often. When women are smaller, their bodies are smaller. They don't have as much musculature or adipose tissue fat, right? So they were literally, I saw in their bodies was a bracing. And when we studied my training in breathwork and biodynamic breathwork, we studied Wilhelm Reich, and he actually postulates that you have a specific posture pattern in your body based on the trauma you had, the age that it happened, and the type of trauma that it happened. And he has all these horribly psychotic, like psychopath, masochist, like the kind of terrible terminology, but it will tell you where in your body that you store this trauma, and it literally becomes something you can see in another person. So that's why this work is so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're talking about the women, I wonder too if there might be, and I'll ask you this question, but childbirth.
For sure, childbirth is very traumatic even in the best of circumstances, right?
Definitely. I had a very traumatic experience with my childbirth that I probably should at some point work with. And it my child was healthy and but it didn't take away my experience, which was hell.
For sure. I mean, kudos to you women who do that. That's an extraordinary feat for anyone. I've been in the personal development field for, I don't know, 25 years. It's mostly been of the cognitive realm. When I started working with the body, I understood what that means. That is pretty much being taken over by emotional states. One minute you're like, okay, I got to do this, business proposal, whatever. The next minute you're sitting on the couch eating Cheetos and you don't know why, right? You can't move forward. Or you are just revving and anxious. And it's basically your nervous system when it has trauma that I was explaining earlier that doesn't get released, it gets trapped. And so a lot of times this couples with early childhood trauma where your parents were meant to model soothing behaviors and they didn't. So what happens is you come out as an adult and you really don't understand the emotions flowing through you. They might be stuck. They might come on suddenly and you don't know how to self-soothe. So the work of the breath that I do brings people into the body. We give people techniques to manage your states, and that's so exciting for me because it's so powerful. And all these labels we give ourselves, lazy, I wish I could do it, some of the
Right.
psychological OCD, I'm not diminishing them, but sometimes that's trauma that someone doesn't know how to process that we can work with. Yeah.
I would say that also it sounds like it comes from awareness as well, and recognizing and embracing that awareness that we do have trauma and that we can deal with it. Um, I mean, that's why AA is so popular because it is the outlet of a group gathering together to
Mhm.
recognize that we have a problem and that we need to deal with it through 12 steps. Um, there's so many questions that I want to ask you. I know you're mentioning with your body work. Was there like an important moment in your life that set you on this path? If you're looking back at your life, was it an event, like a trauma event, and you're like, I want to work with this, I want to work through it, and I want this to become my life? Or was it a little more gradual and just certain signs that the universe has been giving you to eventually work with your clients that you have now?
Well, I don't think you have enough time in that podcast, but I'll try to I'll try to keep it like, condensed. I grew up in a cornfield in Illinois, and I was the wild child, the emotional one, very conservative parents, and this was the 70s. I'm going to date myself. There wasn't any woo-woo stuff. So, my mother would call me an out-of-place flower child, and I feel like it's been the journey of my life to find the hippies, to find the conscious people, to move to California. It's basically answer to your question, trying to resolve my own experiences, feeling unwanted, having a brother who was compared to me, genius brother, and it was my own wounding, particularly my mother wound. And I went about moving to California and Los Angeles. Say what you want about it. It is a playground for anything you want to learn, do, see, experience, try. So many personal development seminars, and I was like a kid in a candy shop. Yes, let me try this, let me try that, and I did them all. And the defining moment, it was cumulative healing, but it was like I understood it, I analyzed it, I could tell you all about it. I was at a plateau until I discovered a breathwork seminar in 2018, and I
Mm.
sat in there, and they basically prompt you to unravel all of your walls and sit raw in front of another person and be in your body. That was the first time I think I was ever in my body. And so that pretty much sparked a curiosity for all things neuroscience and trauma. And I became obsessed because I started bringing it to the table. These presence practices, these breath works, these myofascial release trainings where you sit quietly with the body and wait for the nervous system to release. And they were transforming the lives of my clients. So from that, it was just, I got my focus narrowed down, and I'm just in this tiny little bullseye now. So thank goodness.
When we look at ourselves as a society, I mean, do you see how disconnected we truly are? I mean, there's so much out there that keeps us disconnected that we as a society have to work harder to get connected. And so I have been section hiking with my partner, the Appalachian Trail. And I shared this conversation with a gentleman because when you are out on this trail, everything is okay. And the people that you meet, we share a bond because we're out there enduring something together, and it's nature, and so I've never met people in this way when I'm out on the trail, and it's truly just an uplifting experience. But this gentleman said to me, do you feel like most people enter the trail because of trauma or baggage? I said, absolutely. Because we're not running away from something, we're trying to get to ourselves.
Wow. That makes me like cry. That's amazing.
Yeah. But right, like that's how I see it. When you enter the Appalachian Trail, whether you're doing it from Maine or to Georgia or Georgia to Maine, you're stepping foot on the troubles of everyone else. But as you walk, it's almost like the footsteps become less and less.
Mm.
Because you're not there to win a race. I can't say this for all, but for most that I've seen, they're doing it to connect with themselves.
Right. I was going to say, you can't do that without being in your body.
Right.
Well, and
You
this
don't
is
start out that way.
this is a question I have, because for people listening, I mean, saying, it's the first time I was in my body. I haven't been in my body. And I get that. I don't think I'm all the way there yet. Although I have had those experiences, but I mean, what does that mean for somebody who's thinking, oh, this is like getting out there? Because it
Yeah,
isn't. I mean, it isn't. So yeah.
yeah. Thank you for that. For me, there is a term for it. It's called dissociation, but it's basically checking out. So back to the science of it, when a body is unable to escape trauma, our body can't run, and this is the case a lot of times when we're a child. We can't run away from what's happening to us, especially with sexual abuse. Our body will protect ourselves by checking out. So that will be pretending you're somewhere else, visualizing. I used to go into the TV, so ties back to what we're about to talk about, right? It's something to preoccupy your mind when your body is there. And so I do believe as a society we are so checked out, and it's sort of the American way, right? It's encouraged almost, and I feel like the introduction of the television, it was in so many ways um a I don't want to say a bad
Disservice,
thing. Yeah, a
a
disservice,
disservice.
because we stopped talking to each other. They used to sit around listening to the radio in big groups of families and talking to each other. And now it is so common for the typical American to come home from work and turn on the TV and crack a beer. And what are you doing? You're in the world of the television, but you're not thinking about what am I thinking? What am I feeling? You're drinking alcohol or beer or wine. You're taking yourself further away from what's happening, so you don't have to think about your problems or your experiences. So the trauma starts, and then we have all of these societal things. Let me work 80 hours a week and never take a vacation, and watch the television, and spend hours and hours and hours a day in these virtual worlds, not really connecting with ourselves or each other. And then we have people who don't have any experience of their body. And so you probably live in your head. You busy, always anxious, got to figure everything out. And when's the last time you noticed, oh, my heart's beating fast, or I have anxiety in my stomach? And this is the work I do. This is what I mean bringing into the body. At the slightest hint of something uncomfortable, when I was quote dissociated, I just check out. I'd go somewhere else. I'd daydream. And that's what I mean by not being in the body. You're not resourced with your own power. And also, you get really affected by whatever everyone else is doing around you, because you don't have any sense of self.
Yeah, and you don't have those boundaries. You don't know how to protect that energy from
Right.
coming in.
Right.
Yeah,
And
people.
I'm super sensitive. I'm super empathic. So any energetic stuff in the world would come right in, because I didn't know where I ended and someone else began. And so when you're sourced within, when you're full, you're not as affected, you're not as blown over, because you're embodied.
Yeah.
And that
Sorry.
even just goes to our interpersonal relationships, right?
Absolutely.
And how traumatic they can be collectively, whether it is with our kids or our spouses and partners and whatnot, because we are putting that off, so to speak, because we're not becoming one with ourselves. And I mean, for instance, if you have a partner or have a child or what have you, when was the last time you just sat in silence?
Yes. Silence is a big, scary thing for us in this country. We just don't do it. We don't have any capacity for it, because then you're going to think about what you think and feel.
Right.
And
absolutely.
Those
I know
people. Sorry,
people-
Julie, go ahead.
I was going to say, people's idea of getting out in nature is going with their earbuds in and listening to music and ignoring the tree. And I've been guilty of that from time to time. When I was training for marathons, I needed something to distract me because I didn't want to be in my body at that point. I didn't want to have to think about my muscles and whatever. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think
we haven't
distracted is a great word.
I haven't had a TV in 20 years. And people say, "Oh my God, what do you do?" Well, we
Yeah.
do watch movies, and there are nights when we'll pull up Amazon Prime and just say, "Look, I can't have a conversation today. My brain is too tired," and that's cool. But for the most part, you read, you talk to each other, you go for a walk, you play with the dog, you work in the garden, you do a project, whatever. And there's tons of stuff you can do without a TV, but people don't. That is a scary thought. I have a couple of relatives who have a TV in every room in the house.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to put this out there, Julie. I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but you probably also have a great sex life.
Amen.
Definitely better communication, and
Right.
the
It fosters all of that.
you're talking about the Pacific Coast Trail. A lot of people in the world are not up for that, because they're going to feel the pain in their body, and they don't want to feel that. So.
Right. Absolutely. And you feel that coming out of you. I cry a lot when I hike. Don't care. I'll cry those tears. I'm a big crier. That's how I release. But I will cry because it's appropriate, and I'm releasing whatever needs to be released.
And it's all okay.
Right. Nothing bad will happen. And I think that that's the other piece of it too. Not that we're, continuing down this road of hiking, but when you can walk out into the world and become so small. And that's how I view it. Nature is so big. Nature does not give a shit that you want to hike. Nature will rain on you. Nature will be disgustingly humid on you. It will have mosquitoes. It will have bears. Nature doesn't care about you. And I think being open to that is the most beautiful experience. I enter the trail and I say, may the trail before me be filled with white light, and I will accept whatever comes my way. And then I go with my backpack, and that's it. Whatever's in there is enough.
It's such a perfect metaphor, because a lot of us, it's not just to several things you said. We're not connected to each other, ourselves, but also the world around us. So I do a lot of woo woo stuff that looks like go collect stuff with texture, or go rub the bark of a tree, or go look at the birds, and because we're just not in our senses either. We're just checked out, like, oh, it's not on Twitter, then it doesn't matter, right? So there's a connection you mentioned of being one with our surroundings, and nature is such a beautiful teacher. And the other thing you mentioned that I wanted to just jump in on is the release, right? We not only do we stuff our feelings down, we don't allow ourselves to release. So many beautiful ways to release: crying, moving the body, singing, all of these, breathing, all of these things we're not versed in because we're not taught. What, like, our idea of releasing something is drink a beer.
Right. So that's not even a release, that's a hide.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Right?
a freeze.
That's like, let's not show up.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when you do that and it becomes stuck in your body, all of the emotion becomes turned in on yourself, and you are sort of held it in.
I'd like to mention something that's been on, well, everyone's mind, but my mind in particularly is dealing with COVID. For many of the doctors and nurses that had to, in the past year and a half, deal with so much death, so much unknowing, and so many families, trauma stories, painful stories, myself included. My father's dying currently from COVID. I want you to really reflect on that, since it's topical, and what you would, or if you have anyone that you've worked with, I'm sure you have, in the response, and I guess creating more empathy, but also creating a sense of moving forward and releasing that trauma with gratitude, with compassion.
I was just saying earlier, we're going through a global collective trauma like I don't think any of us in our generation have ever lived through. I think the last time would have been probably World War II, right? That everyone on the planet was dealing with a collective trauma. And I just want to put out there, I'm not perfect. I don't want you to get the impression I sit around and like just breathe all day. I eat Cheetos in the bathtub some days when I just can't deal. You can do the best you can, right?
Tana, just for the record, you do breathe all day, just not the way that you're talking about.
Right, you're right. But yeah, so what I've been doing to Johnny, is my response to COVID has been to offer programs where people get quiet and they are in nature and they are sourced. We do specific breathing techniques. So anytime you can be with what's happening, even if that's just to sit quietly or cry or journal or just here's what's happening and it sucks, but can I sit with it? Can I be with it? And like we're talking about, a lot of people, they just don't want to do it. They want to check out. So, but that's going to stay with them the more they push it away. So the more you can be with, do you know what I mean by be with? Just instead of numbing out, sit with it, think
honor
about
it,
be upset about it, find the gratitude in it. And support is so important now. We're having to reach out, and people like me, like I'm a lone ranger, I got this, that's a trauma response too, by the way, but it's a perfect time to reach out to friends, to let people hold you, to accept gifts. Hey, can you make me dinner? And these are things I feel like there's a hidden blessing of COVID, is that we're learning to come together in a way that we have not ever done it, in a cooperative way. And even this podcast is proof of that, right? You're bringing people around the world to support each other. So you have compassion, self-compassion, sitting with and support, whatever that looks like to you.
Yeah, and I think some people worry that they're going to get stuck in this downward spiral of emotion, and ask me how I think about that, because it's it's been a legitimate fear of mine, because I have had periods where I just am like, how far down is it going to go? How am I going to come back? What do I do? But again, I think those are because we're avoiding the feelings, and they're
Mhm.
just pulling us down. If we would just look at them and then let them go, we'd bounce
Yeah.
back up a lot quicker. But I mean, we aren't taught how to deal with those things. We're not, don't let them see you cry, right?
Right.
Especially
So
with men, right? Men don't cry, boys don't cry. Don't do it, right? No. Yeah. So I think that that's really a beautiful thing to point out, is that we're afraid of our emotions because we're not used to them. And we do feel like it's going to overtake us. And we don't maybe not know how to regulate our nervous system. But the more we express through our words, through our writings, through our body, the more we're going to get used to the emotions. And they are meant to be fluid, they're supposed to move through you. But it is definitely a process. You're not just going to be like, oh, blow the lid off of it. So that's why, if you have, therapy or somatic practices or breathwork training, these are all professionals who will help you process this and work with your nervous system. And you don't do it all at once, you do it in tiny little pieces. So, yeah.
That's great, Tana, because that speaks to exactly what we were talking about in the last podcast. And, it's this 1%. It's really the tagline of our podcast, right? It's just become 1% better. Throw
Mm,
out this all or nothing, because
mm,
it's just about being 1% better. Feel one feeling today,
yeah.
and
yeah.
Yeah.
then you'll get used to feeling two feelings
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
three feelings. And, I think that this is wonderful, because just to be honest, from a personal standpoint, this speaks to everything that I'm going through and have gone through in my journey, like truly. And just to go back to COVID for a second, I can tell you, and this may come off a little crass, and I apologize, but I think you'll understand after I'm finished. I loved COVID. Now, why did I love COVID? Not because of the illness, the sickness, because it slowed people down, because it brought us back to each other. Because you know what? I've always been outside. I think you've kind of gotten, I have this nature bug about me. When I was outside, the trails were filled. They were
Mm,
filled, and I loved it. I loved sharing that experience with people who have never probably experienced it before. But unfortunately, now what I'm witnessing is COVID has sort of diminished in its, not in its, not in the illness standpoint, but from a societal standpoint. It's sort of just in the back of our minds, but now we're allowed to do more things, right?
yeah.
And now there's less people outside. And that is
100%.
unfortunate to me.
That was the best year of my life in so many ways. And I don't diminish the suffering. I felt it. It was terrible. My heart ached for humanity. And the birds came out. The sky was bluer in Los Angeles than I've seen in 20 years. And it was quiet. And what I want to say about that is, I believe normal, especially in a city like Los Angeles, is toxic. We're
Mm.
not meant to run around Mach 4 20 hours a day, and everyone's just blah, so in traffic, and just about the boiling point. And COVID was just a, like you just crop dusted everyone with weed. Everybody's chilled out and just mellow, and that our
Right.
nervous system was able to be like,
It was
and
thanking us.
Yeah, the
right,
waters around Venice were clear. The dolphins
yeah,
came into play.
I
Russia,
know,
near where I live, is one of the top 10 worst air quality cities because there's so much manufacturing here. We could see
yeah,
all of the mountains and individual trees that we see from our terrace. Yeah, I mean, the nature said, "Okay, I've got this."
yeah. And we were meant to live in harmony with nature. That's, I believe, one of my soapboxes, is why we're all so miserable in this world, is because we're not living in harmony with the earth. We're meant to.
I think
No,
that's.
We're
you're
I
trying to
think that's.
profit off the earth, and
Yeah,
Right.
that's where a lot of issues. I said we're trying to profit off of the earth. I mean, we're doing it successfully, but not to a healthy standpoint. And Mother Nature, she's kicking our ass back. She's
yeah.
she's letting us know there's
Yeah.
always a balancing act.
That's one of the reasons why I am somewhat envious of Johnny and where you live, because of the sense of community, and that you have that all around. that the animals are out and wandering, and you've
Yeah,
got your
horses are
mountain and the
running up and
goat.
down the street. Dogs are doing their own thing. Yeah.
It's a different world from where I live right now, right?
Well, and I think, Tana, to your point, right, and to Julie, your point, right, we exist in this not idea of control.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nature should be controlled. I
Mm.
have a perfect backyard. Squirrels be gone, chipmunks be gone, moles be gone, birds, oh no, the birds bring all the other things. Birds be gone. There was somebody that I was talking to yesterday that said, oh, we were talking about the mosquitoes because we've had so much rain, but the mosquitoes are like monster mosquitoes. They're not even your average mosquitoes. And that's fine. We've had so much rain, but nature is beautiful. We have mosquitoes. It's fine. That's what we have to deal with. And she said, oh, well, the gentleman next door sprayed his entire backyard. And somebody else was like, oh, I really need to do that. And she looked at me and she said, but then there's no butterflies.
Oh my God, that makes me so sad.
Right? So just think about that. For every one thing that we try to control about nature, you're losing 5, 7, 10 other pieces of it.
Mhm.
For what? For vanity? To make you more comfortable? That doesn't sit well with me. That's not how I live.
Yeah. So when are we moving to this tiny little sustainable community in the forest?
Tana, I'm there. I'm there.
I hope that what comes out of COVID, and I know some people, they went right back because they didn't want this, but a lot of us woke up and said no.
Hmm?
This is a line in the sand. We were not meant to live like this crazy life that we have, and normal is crazy. And want to be in touch with each other. We want to create, we want to collaborate, we want to empower, we want to be with others in a more profound way. And I do believe that's why people like us are stepping up now, is to offer that model, that door, that service to come home to ourselves and what we want to be, do.
Just going back to, if I may, when you speak of childhood trauma, I find, but you're the expert here, that most of our trauma resides within our childhood and how things were modeled to us. And I know for myself, I had a hard time accepting that because, again, I thought it meant something negative without being open to the fact that no, here I am. I'm 38. I'm doing all this childhood work. And I can confidently say, this is why I react the way that I do. It's a response to trauma. It doesn't mean my mom or my parents were bad. They did the best with what they had at the time, with what they knew. That's all you can ask. But I do believe everything we're walking around with now is a product of our childhood. Do you find that? What do you feel about that?
So the original wounding of our childhood is really what sets us up. It's like the foundation. So that is your core wound, and it sets up a pattern of how you see yourself in the world. So yes, most of the time, whatever starts in childhood, and we have to understand that trauma is passed down through generations. Your mother did what her mother did, and what her mother did, and also pathologies like alcoholism. So really, you could have a great childhood, and your mother just had her own stuff that she was dealing with, right? Um, if I lost my train of thought. So yeah.
Does the trauma just build through our lives with different experiences, and kind of there's that core root or the root of it, and then it models some of our behaviors, maybe how we process or don't process our emotions? I mean, I know I've had things happen to me in my adulthood that were definitely traumatic.
Mm,
So I
mhm,
can't say those were that goes back to childhood, but
mhm.
do our thought patterns or our behaviors have kind of a connectedness to how that ends up happening?
Right. So your brain trauma actually will affect your neural pathways, how your brain is wired. It also affects the development. If it's severe enough, a brain will look like a traumatic injury. They've put scans up of childhood abuse and neglect with a severe motorcycle accident. They look similar. It's traumatic brain injury. It'll affect the biological development of your brain if it's severe enough. So you can't really make a generalization. What you can generalize is the way when you're developing as a young child, it's the way you see the world, the way you see yourself, the way you see others. So it affects all of your interactions.
Okay.
And then you could have an adult trauma like a car accident that will affect you later, or it could trigger something from the past. A lot of times we'll react to something, like somebody will tell us something and we'll have a huge reaction that doesn't seem worthy of what just happened. It's because it triggered an experience from our past, for sure.
Probably happened to all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Suddenly
Thinking
you're
So,
like,
about that, just talking about that brought it back.
yeah,
suddenly you're like that 6-year-old, you're like, you took my cookie. And your roommate's like, what are you talking about? It just,
that definitely has happened to me more than once. I was eating. We have these small bowls that we like. They're personal bowls, not like American size big salad bowls that we can eat. Yeah, I was eating my soup. My wife was wanting to get something of mine. I was like, no, no, it's mine. You're not taking it. She got mad at me. Like, yes, I want what's mine. You can have yours. I think it was probably because I never got enough cake when I was young. I don't know. But
exactly. It's like, I don't know if you guys saw that movie, The Office Space, where that guy was, and there's no more cake, and he was always the one that didn't get the cake. So
Right.
Milton. Yeah.
Yep. And his
that is
stapler.
like
the one with the red
mm,
stapler. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll revert to childhood in those moments, and we'll use the child's language.
Is it a swing line?
Yes.
It has to be the swing line.
It is a red swing line. That was a gift from Ian because that's one of my favorite movies.
awesome.
And Julie does have 15 pieces of flair, if not 20.
Well, I mean, I want to just say that this is a heavy topic, and I love the neuroscience of it, but it doesn't always have to be excruciating, right? And heavy. It can be. I have more fun in my body. I have more intimacy now. I have more connection. I have more laughter, more joy, because there's, when you release all the stuck energy, you have this vitality come back. And
Absolutely.
my work is like we said, you're not going to just lift the lid off and feel every emotion you've ever felt for 20 years. That would destroy somebody. So we do it in little pieces, and we laugh and do silly things. So I don't want people to be run off by the word trauma or the heaviness of it.
No, but may I ask you? So if I came to you, let's say 3-4 years ago, and I knew about your work, and I said, Tana, I'm stuck. I have all these feelings. I'm having these visceral responses. I'm reacting to people poorly. I'm not representing, my insides don't match my outsides. Perhaps you could just take us through, of course, without, obviously there'd be a lot more intimate and, vulnerable discussions, but, just hearing what how would you guide me through that?
Right. So right now I have sort of different modalities I work with people in, and I'm also starting to combine them. So would be depending on which entry point you're looking for. Sometimes I do this work on the table, the massage table, and it
Mhm.
looks like a massage, but we're going to be holding in different places and being with pain spots and emotions coming up. Sometimes it's just straight coaching, and like I said, now I'm putting together a program called Embodiment that's sort of putting all those things together. So we work with practices like noticing your surroundings, noticing your senses. What do you see? What do you smell? What do you taste? What are you aware of? And then we work with practices of being in the body. What am I noticing in my body? What am I feeling? And then we bring in movement. And at the same time, we're pairing um, emotions that are coming up and working with them, and tracking my wife tried to take my bowl of cereal to what happened as a child that made that response so visceral, right? So we're sort of putting all the pieces together in a body centered way. Yeah.
When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah.
So we're developing awareness of the external. Like we said, we're checking out of the virtual world and into the real world. We're developing awareness of the internal. That's the part that has largely been lost in so many people. And we're giving tools to move energy, move emotions. That's through the body, through vocalization. And we are bringing inquiry around, how do I show up and maybe why? And we're exploring these things tiny bits at a time. We're expanding the capacity to be in a situation without going into a activated state.
You said that you've explored quite a few modalities and different practices. Both body is what you're talking about today, but where my interest sometimes lies even more is with the soul, with the spirit, with Reiki, with key energy. Do you deal with that, or do you have a circle of influence where that also affects your practice? Because my goodness, if our chi is stuck, then that will be a sign in our body. If our chakra is stuck, either from our heart, our crown chakra, or our root chakra, which many of us have a crossed root chakra,
Mhm.
are you able to work through that as well?
Definitely. I've studied so many energy modalities. I'm a Reiki master. I began channeling when I started doing Reiki. So how I use that now is I will use it as diagnostic more often, what's happening in the body and figuring out where the energy is stuck. And also through inquiry, I will use the channeling, like, oh, this is what I kind of have a sense that what comes up. And I've been coupling a little of this energy work with chakra work. I have
Mm.
a pelvic grounding seminar that I do where we bring movement to the pelvis and work with that energy to free it up, right? So dabble a little bit in that. And it's really powerful because you said it's on a mind body level.
Mhm.
And the breath is really the access point to working with the nervous system and the energy field, I find. So yes,
Great, great.
yes to all of that. Like I said, I'm just learning. I have all these trainings, and I know what the focus is, and I'm just, how in the world do I put all of this together? And it looks a little bizarre right now because sometimes we'll crawl around the floor, barking or doing lion roar, like, and sometimes we're sitting quietly, and sometimes we're breathing and kicking, and it's so out of the box, but it's fun, and it's pretty transformative in my opinion.
Just being open to
Mhm.
Yeah.
the transformation, right?
Yeah.
Now, Tana, if somebody wants to work with you, say in Massachusetts, I'm just wondering, is there a virtual component that is available?
So I'm doing all my work online right now, with the
Great.
exception of a little bit of body work here in Los Angeles. So I do Zoom sessions, and I found that the work translates beautifully. When I'm directing you to what I would normally do is touch, we're doing self touch. So I'll be showing you how to release the muscles, which is also something I bring into the work. So it's all Zoom based.
That's great. And I think another gratitude we owe to COVID,
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
that Zoom is a-okay, and it's really opened up the work for all four of us here.
Mhm.
I really shifted my whole business. I was just doing massage in Los Angeles and running all over the city, and COVID hit, and well, shit, okay. Sat at home for 3 months and thought, okay, well, I don't think this is coming back anytime soon. What can I do? And so I just started bringing people together in women's circles, and it was so powerful just to show up for someone else.
I had the privilege of being in one of those women's circles, and it really was transformative for me. If I didn't have so many other things going on, and that's no excuse, but I would still be doing it. Yeah. Met some
Yeah.
amazing women there and just had it such a great experience. So,
Thank you, Julia. It's a pleasure having you.
Now,
But yeah,
Tana,
it
just
really does translate.
yeah. Well, when you talk about breath work, and as you all know, that's something that I'm very passionate about as well. And I believe that there's a direct interplay, right, between our nervous system, the vagus nerve, whatever. They all speak to each other via the breath.
Mhm.
And what I find is our breath brings us back to ourselves. And the way that I speak this is, we're all on this planet and we all are looking for some form of control in one way or another. And when we say control, I often find it to be a rigid word, but I don't mean it in the sense of controlling another or controlling a situation. But when things are happening around us, we seek the control. And what I always say is that the control is in your breath, because it helps you show up the way you want to. If there's nothing else, you have the power to change how you might react or how you might show up just by the breath. Do you identify with that?
Absolutely. And I know you share I don't know what your training is, but I know you share breath training. And Sometimes I will just, I'll give this to your listeners. Sometimes I will just say, think of the ocean, think of the tide. It goes in, it goes out, it goes in, it goes out, and you don't have to do anything. And it's so regular. And that feels like a beacon of hope in this crazy world where often it feels like everything's out of control. So the
Mhm.
breath is really an opportunity. This is what I can control. The world can be swirling around me, but I can find peace within.
Because it brings you back to yourself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's really the only thing we have control over anyway.
I agree with you.
Easier said, I know.
Of course. The more, but the more that we try, and this is what I always say too, it's laying those neural pathways so you don't have to try so hard the next time. And the next time it's becoming more automatic for us. So you have to put in a little bit of the work. You have to.
That's
We
why we
have
call it
to.
a practice.
Right, right. Things aren't just going to change automatically, or you can't just sit and expect things to change around you. It's not how the world works, right? We have to show up for ourselves before we show up for anybody else.
Yeah, well, and look at like professional athletes. How many times do they do drills over and over and over and over and over until they don't, I mean, they still do them even in professional levels, but it's because that repetition is so important. It's
Mhm.
because that practice is so important. So, yeah, I know breathing is something we just do, but it's also something we can practice.
Yeah, the one thing that I've taken with me that I incorporate all the time, I don't always use all my tools, right? Some of us are guilty of this, like I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. But the
Yeah.
thing that I do consistently is if something is feeling overwhelming or just like in a state of I want to just go eat everything in the fridge or do something like that, I will sit quietly and I'll turn everything off and I will just notice, just be with. And just that stilling will reset your nervous system to a calmer state. Yeah. No
Amazing.
specific breathing necessary. Just what's
Just
going on.
exists.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
done that just in the grass,
Yes.
just in the grass when I've been really not feeling, again, I'll just go lay in the grass, unencumbered, look up at the sky and just exist.
Yes. And then you're connecting with the electromagnetic field of the earth, and that's a whole other healing technique. So
Right.
Mhm.
yeah, it's one of my resources all the time. I call it time with mother.
I love it. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Our
Yeah.
neighbors think I'm bizarre, and Ian too, because a lot of times we'll go out and we'll sit on the grass, we'll play with the dog, or lay on the grass with the dog, and they're kind of like,
They're
That's
probably like these Americans and these Brits, man, when they get together, they do some weird things. That's what I always say when like me and my partner are doing something, that we'll be out hiking and whatever. I'm probably like, I always am joking. I'm always like, they probably are just like, oh, lesbians are so weird.
wow. Sitting on the grass is a revolutionary thing. I don't know if I could hang there.
Right. But it seems funny, but like people are probably perceiving that. Maybe they're not using the label, but it's funny sometimes when I'm like, yeah, they're probably just like, lesbians are so weird. We're just sitting on the grass or like we're just hiking together. Oh, so weird.
so if somebody did want to work with you, where can they find you?
So my website is tanagmarie.com. And I also, that is my handle at Instagram as well. And then, gosh, you guys have my Facebook link. I don't remember it because it has too many words.
It's okay. We'll post everything in the show notes as well.
I have a women's only Facebook community. That is the place I'm most active with right now. And also my website is a way to find me.
So is it completely no boys allowed or is it just encouraged?
I do trauma work with individual men. But I find that when I'm doing a group container, the level of intimacy that I'm committed to is better with a women only because a lot of women feel more comfortable
Mhm.
with women only, especially if we're dealing with people who had sexual trauma or something like that.
And I think, this is something that keeps coming up within our podcast, but I feel like for the women now, it's this total universal shift where women need to, I shouldn't say need, that's a very bold word, but they should start showing up for themselves. And this idea of self-care, not being selfish. And, we had somebody else on the podcast who was training for a marathon. And just to give you an idea that, they were saying, will you just leave your family? You leave your husband and your kid for 4 hours and go train? She's like, well, my husband goes golfing twice a week.
Right.
Right. But yet that's okay. But we are in a society where the women have to constantly show up for their families, for the whomever, right? And they often neglect themselves. And so I love that there's these little places for women to come and unravel, because I'm here, I'm a woman, I have a family, and it's not often where you feel free to unravel.
Yeah, and that's perfect description for the word I do. And I really believe that this in time and in space is the rise of the divine feminine. That's what spirit has been channeling through me since the get-go of March 2020. Is this is a time for us to step into our power. And not that men are going to be thrown by the wayside. They're going to be incorporated. They're going to honor our power and our wisdom. And a lot of women right now are redefining themselves. They're like, okay, I did it society's way. I raised the kids. I did the corporate job. And now F that. I'm going to do what I came to this earth to do. And we need support in that. So I love that that's part of my mission, is to empower women in that way.
Your 3 ingredients to quality of life. If you were to give your essence, give that recipe to someone else, what would those 3 key ingredients be?
That is a hard question. Quality of life. I don't know if I can generalize that. For me, it would be nature, coffee. No. I think connection. I'm going to try to generalize. Connection,
Cinnamon.
resource, and expression, maybe. I think quality of life is when you are filling your shoes, what you came here to express, to create, to be, to say, to do. And finding that is a beautiful thing, and it's not easy for some of us.
I think all of us can point on ourselves.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to realize it.
Yeah, it was good. For me, it's a tiny house in the forest. That's what I'm looking forward to. And living in
there, but like 10 miles away.
No, I'm out at LA, but living in accord with Mother Earth and in community, that's what I'm looking for quality of life. And still being able to do the work I do without being bound by a location.
And Tana will be there, and Tiffany will be there, and Johnny will be there.
I'll make my way.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to point this out because you know how I am, but we have a Julie, a Johnny, and now we have 2 T's. Usually I'm just surrounded by J's. So thank you, Tana.
Oh, you're welcome. You guys
thank you for the balance.
I love it too, because you guys are both on the same side of the pictures, and Johnny and I are on the same side, at least on my screen.
I think this sounds really cliche, but I think the journey home to yourself is really rewarding. It seems like it can be like a lot of work, but so worth it. Yeah. I'll just leave you with this. Is you're looking at me, I'm 51 and I have a hair full of gray hair, and that was directly came out of this work that I've done. Is I just posted a picture of my old self on my website the other day, just for illustration. I was so miserable and disembodied, and I couldn't stand who I was, and I was hiding behind my brown hair that was woefully dyed and pitifully obvious, and I just couldn't be. I couldn't be with myself. And through this journey, this work, I was like, all right, here we go. Let's just embrace who I am and embrace what is. I'm gray. I didn't want it to be, right? How many times do we think, well, no, I can't deal with that. But you have no control over some things. I have no control of the fact that my hair is gray. And so I could fight against it or I could accept it. And that was a 1.5 year kick-ass, kicking and screaming, drag your body behind, I'm not doing it, tantrum, that ultimately I'm completely different human being. And I don't love this all the time, but I'm rocking it. I'm like, here I am.
You're
This is me.
totally rocking it. Yeah.
You're showing up for
I like
yourself and not hiding behind something else.
And I tell you, I could not have been on a video camera earlier without doing the work that I've done and showing up for others. So it's worth it, and you don't have to fight so hard, but that's uniquely me. So
Right.
I had to make it a drag out battle.
I love it.
Yeah.
So Tana, before we end here, is there any fun fact or something that nobody knows about you? Something for you to share. You get to choose.
Well, I was a
judo master.
A what?
A judo master. A judo
No.
black belt.
No, I'll say I don't know, the most maybe unique thing about me, which may not be all that surprising, is at the age of 36, I decided to put my life in a storage locker and go muck around South America for a solo backpack trip for 10 months. And I went around the entire continent, and I volunteered with monkeys and stayed in the rainforest. And I'll say that really enlivens me. So sometimes I just bug out, and it's usually involving monkeys and a volunteer vacation somewhere across the globe. Did it again in 2018 in South Africa. So that's kind
You're
of
working your way across to Southeast Asia. Just keep coming.
I'll be there.
Yeah, make your way to Thailand. There's plenty of monkeys.
It's on my list. So yeah, Italy, Thailand. So I'm pretty much a global nomad. That's something that's unique about me.
Tana, thank you so very much for coming on our show today and speaking to us as vulnerably as you have and sharing your work and all of it. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel alive. I feel very energetic with myself. So thank you. You have a way with it, even just talking about it. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. And I enjoyed every single one of you. And I'm so excited that you're giving this platform of different modalities of healing and offering that, because it's so needed right now, and such a service. And thank you for bringing the fun to it.
We got to have the fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a pleasure.